Okay, we're going to resume with lesson 9. So we've largely completed our shop by category page. We can show the category up at the top. We can display our products with our thumbnails, and we've got our little add to cart form. Yeah, we could look at doing that with a rollover. I'm going to leave that part for now. That's certainly something we could look at doing, or you could look at doing on your own as an enhancement. Okay, Shisato, we could leave category ID. I'll just put it back for a moment. So when I put it back to category ID, this is how we had it originally. When we do it this way, it works. But notice the URL. It's kind of we get this syntax. We get a question mark, and then the name of the parameter and an equal sign. So it's functional. We could do it this way. We would then need to redefine our parameter as category ID, and that would work. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with it. The reason I changed it, however, is when we use ID as our parameter name, Visual Studio knows this is a primary key. So the formatting of it will do on the URL, on the link, it gives us this format instead. So it's a little bit cleaner, a little more modern syntax in terms of the URL, that we don't have the question mark and that parameter name and an equal sign. So both will work, but this is commonly, if we're passing primary key values as a parameter in .NET, this is the standard. So by default, so using ID, it's an indicator that this is a primary key we're passing. Okay? Excellent question. So now we need to write our add to cart method. And this is actually going to be a post method. So I'm going to use the HTTP post decorator here. So our add to cart method is going to take two input parameters. What are those two parameters going to be called? What data types are they going to use? So we can go and look at our shop by category page. So we've got our little form here. It's going to call this method. It's going to post my form. Yep, Amar. So we'll use int as a data type. And what are the parameters we need to pass to the add to cart method? There's going to be two of them. Yep, we're going to need the product ID and the quantity. That's right, and they're both going to be integers, right? Our product ID is hidden, and our quantity is going to come from the input. So for example, if we go and view the source, inside of each form, right, here's our first form. We've got a hidden product ID with a value of 4, and then we've got our quantity. So we'll want these two values, product ID, quantity, both are integers. Okay. So we got to do a number of things here. We are going to be saving these items to the database using, we got a lot of stuff open here, speed things up, using our cart item model. So here is the cart item class that we defined. I know it's been a while. We defined this and talked about it back in lesson 4, but we haven't actually used it. So we should have a look at the structure of the cart item. We've got a primary key. We've got our quantity. Okay, well, that's going to be one of our second parameter. We've got the price. So we're going to have to look that up. We've got the product ID. We've also got a user ID. We need to know whose shopping cart is this. Right? If Pauha and Amar and I, we all put the same product in our shopping carts, the website needs a way of distinguishing Amar's cart from Pauha's cart from my cart. Right? So we've got to attach them to a user ID somehow. That's going to be a little bit tricky if we're allowing people to shop anonymously. So we're going to have to figure that part out. So the price we can look up, and then the quantity, product ID, we have those parameters already. The user ID, we're also going to have to kind of work on programmatically. So we can look up the price. So we can use our dbcontext.products.find and pass in our primary key value. And then we'll just set a price variable equal to the price of this particular product. The other way we could do this that would be correct, we could skip this if we wanted to, and we could also embed the price in another hidden field in our form and pass it as a third parameter. I think I'd prefer to look it up. Can't be hacked. Now, we'll want to set the user ID of the cart item. So we can distinguish multiple users who might be buying the same product. For the moment, we'll come back to this piece. It's going to be a little more complex because we're going to have several different scenarios. So we're going to need a separate method that's got some logic in it. We'll come back to that. So for now, we're just going to hard code it for now. We'll just say var user ID equals, I'm just going to put in a string for now. We'll come back to this. This way. So we'll write the logic later when we'll have to kind of think through all the different scenarios. But let's first we want to just focus on getting this cart item saved to the database. So we'll just hard code this for now. We're going to create a new cart item. And Visual Studio is going to complain because it can't find our cart item class. And our cart item class, it's over here in the models namespace. So we will need to make a reference to our models namespace in order to use any of these classes. So I will just add a reference to our global club.models namespace. This should clear up the error on line 54. I'll reference it. Cart item. It's now recognized. And now we can start setting the properties. There's basically 4 properties we need to set, right? The product ID and quantity, which will come from our input parameters, and then our price and user ID. Our product ID will be equal to our product ID parameter. Quantity will be equal to quantity. Price will be equal to our price variable, our local variable declared here. Okay, what's going on? Oh, we set. Oh, I think we got a little data type mismatch. Yes, we do. Our product model, the price is a decimal. In our cart item, we actually set it as a double, but we can just cast it. Would probably make sense to use the same data type, but this will work. Didn't think about that when we designed these classes. Would have made sense to use a double for both, but we'll just do a conversion. No problem. And now we want to save to cart items table in DB. So we'll add our new item, and then we'll call save changes. This will commit that insert to the database. Now we're going to have to do some more with this later, but this code, we'll test it out in a minute. It should add to the database when we click add to cart. Now we still got an error on line 46. How come? Why is our add to cart method name underlined in red? Yeah, there's no return statement. We're not actually going to build a view for this. What do you think should happen after we add that item to the database? Okay, Mark, you're on the right track. I mean, we could add a view. I think in this case, we maybe won't add a view. What should the user see? Okay, we could show them a message or an alert. Yes. What else could we show them that might give them a little more information or act as sort of a confirmation? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Manjinder. Let's take them to the cart page and they can see everything in their cart. Okay, we could do it as like a floating cart. That's going to be a little more complex. So we're going to build a cart page. And every time they click add to cart, we're going to save the item to the database. And then we're going to redirect the user to the cart page so they can see the cart. Now, we could do a thank you, but that typically happens at the end of a checkout. Yulia, no to which part? You don't want to take them to the cart? Well, you don't have to. I'm going to do it in mine. We'll see. Now, again, we could ask them to log in, but most carts don't force you to log in until you actually go to checkout. We can add some different options on the cart page. We can let them keep shopping, take them back to the main shop page. We can let them go back to the previous page if they want to add more items from that category, or we can give them an option to check out. We'll put all of those options on our cart page. Yeah, we might let them edit the quantity. I'm not sure if we'll have time to do that, but we'll build the cart page today, but we'll probably have to add some of the features next week. So now we will load cart page. So we will return a redirect to action. So we are going to redirect to a method that we're going to build called cart. So let's try this out. If this works, we're going to get a blank screen. It's going to redirect us to /shop/cart, but we haven't built that method. We haven't built that view. So we're just going to get a white screen. But at least we can then go and look in the database. We can look in the cart items table and see if anything got added to the cart with the user ID of some user. So let's test this code out first. Once we can get it to work, then we're going to have to deal with the user ID in a better way. This is just a temporary solution. Once we deal with the user ID, then we're also going to have to build a cart method in view. And then we're also going to build the ability to remove an item from the cart. So I'm going to go and try this now. In order to see if this works, I want to connect to the database so that we can query, as we're working with this, we can query our cart items table. So right now in my global grub, I've got cart items, but the table's empty. There's nothing here. So I'm going to try the add to cart method and refresh this query, see if anything gets added. So I'm going to go. I'm a big oyster fan. $12.99. I guess it's probably for a kilogram of oysters. So I'll put that in my cart. I have to restart my server. I don't know why it sort of dies on me sometimes. All right, we'll try it again. Love some oysters for dinner. I'll add to cart. Okay, this is encouraging. It took me to shop cart, so my method didn't crash before this. It's encouraging. So now I can go back to my database, rerun my query, and now I've got quantity 1, $12.99. My user ID is some user. I click back. I want 3 trays of sushi. Add to cart. Cool, quantity 3, price $8.99. My selected product. So our add to cart method looks like it's working. However, there are a couple of issues with it that we need to fix, and here's the first one. Right now, we're just hard coding the user ID. Obviously, this is no solution. We are not having one shopping cart for everyone that uses our website. Chaos. So what we need to do is write a method that's going to process a bit of logic and try to figure out how do we attach the items to a particular user. If the user's logged in, that's easy. We can just attach it based on their email address. The problem is most users aren't going to log in until they're ready to check out. So we also need a solution. If somebody is shopping anonymously and putting items in the cart, how do we track those and group those items together and separate them from every other user that's also shopping on the site? So what we're going to do is we're going to write another method down here called getUserID. So we're going to write the logic here to generate a unique user ID. And we're going to need to enable, we haven't worked with the session object yet in .NET Core, but we're going to need a session because we need that user ID to persist as the user moves around and navigates and shops, puts item in the cart and moves from page to page. So we need something that's going to persist so we can use a session for this. So we are going to check a session for an existing user ID for this user's cart. We'll say if, and the session object in ASP.NET, it's part of the HTTP context. And it has a method called getString. So we are checking for a session variable called user ID. we're saying, does this session variable called user ID exist? Now, it doesn't recognize the getString method. We just need to make a reference here to the ASP.NET Core HTTP library. This library will include the getString method. And as you can imagine, there's a getString method to read a session variable. There's also a setString method to set a string variable as a session variable. So I'll just accept that reference. It adds the reference to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP. Our getString method is now enabled. So if we have nothing, this means this is user's first cart item. So they don't have an existing shopping cart yet. We'll create a local variable called user ID. We'll just initialize it to an empty string. Now we've got two possibilities, right? So the user's putting something in their cart for the first time. There's two different scenarios. Scenario one is the user actually has an account and is logged in. In that scenario, it's really easy. We can just take their email address and we'll use their email address in our session variable. So if user.identity, if their identity is authenticated, then use email. So in this case, we'll say user ID equals the user.identity.name. That'll be their email address. So that's a simple scenario. We already know who the person is. Great. We'll just use their email address to attach any items they put in their shopping cart. But what about when somebody isn't logged in? So that's the case right now, right? In my Firefox browser, we can see I'm not logged in. So I don't have access to the customer's email address. How can we generate some kind of unique identifier? There's several different ways we could do it. So if we have 100 people shopping anonymously on our site, so we don't know the email address of any of them, we've already done it in the course where we generated a unique identifier previously. How did we do that before? Anybody remember when we generated some kind of unique identifier? At what point did we do that? Yeah, for the image, that's right. Thanks, Jennifer and Alex. Yeah, we can use the GUID class. So we can use GUID here to generate a unique identifier, and then we can attach that. We can put that, create a session variable called user ID with that unique identifier. This way we know every different browser session will have a unique identifier. So we use the GUID class. There are other ways of doing this. This is probably the easiest way. Another option would be, I believe the session object has an ID as well. So the other option I think we could use, I'll show you both. There may be an ID. Yeah, so we could also just use the session ID, which is a string. So I'll put this in as a comment. I'll use the GUID class, or you could just get the session ID really is a GUID on its own. So if I'm even on my same computer, if I open, Firefox and Chrome and visit the site in each browser, each one of them will have a unique session ID. Doesn't matter that it's the same computer, same IP address. Either will work. So now we want to store user ID in a session var. So I will call setString. I'm going to create a session variable called user ID and set it equal to our, there's two parameters. It's just the name of the variable. That's a key and a value. So we're setting a string variable in the session object called user ID, and we're going to pass in the user ID. So it will either be the user's email address or some kind of random unique string that we're going to get either by creating a new GUID or just using the session ID, whichever one you prefer. Now our method, we have to send that string back. So we want to return our session variable. If our session variable isn't null, that's fine. It means the user's already put something in the cart. We've already generated an identifier for that cart, and we're just going to return it anyway. So outside of the if statement, we're going to return our session variable. So three scenarios here. The first scenario, the cart is empty. So we have no session variable, but our user's logged in, so we'll use their email address. Then we'll store their email address in a session variable and return that string to the calling code. Second scenario, user has no cart, but they're anonymous. We're going to create an ID, attach it to their cart. Third scenario is they already have an existing cart, so there's already items in their shopping cart, so they've already got an active session variable called user ID. Again, we'll just return that value back so we can put more items in the same cart. So now that we've got this algorithm, we want to call it, we want to invoke it from add to cart. No. That's, if I'm not logged in, I have items in a cart. If I close the browser and open again, no, the items don't persist. That's right, the session ends with the browser. If you are logged in, yes, you can close the browser, or even go from one browser to another, and the items will persist if you log in. We'll try these different scenarios to see. But that's typical. Right? If I close my browser here, I don't really want to do it, I've got an item in my cart. Well, you know what? Let's go here. I'll do it in Edge. So let's go to theirs. I'll put a couple items in my cart and then close my browser. So shop. Okay, put one of these in. Pick up. What else do I want? I cannot stand eggnog. Okay, yes, I'm almost out of gochujang, so I'll add that. So I've got two items in my cart. If I close Edge, and now I go back, Eggnog is a crime against humanity, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to go back. I've closed, reopened my browser. Okay, they've used a cookie here, I guess. So my card actually persisted. Interesting. We're using a session, so it won't persist in our case. If this is in production, we're potentially going to fill the cart item table. Yes, but the cart item table is only while we're shopping. Once we check out and complete the checkout process, we're going to transfer the cart items. We're going to generate an order, and we're going to transfer the cart items to the order items table. And then we're going to wipe the cart out. So the cart doesn't persist. Cart gets removed once checkout is complete. So things don't stay in the cart items table forever. The cart items table is useful though, because it allows us, many sites will give you an abandoned cart report. So we can actually see what items do people like enough to put in their cart, but not finish buying. Maybe that's a clue. People like the products, but maybe they don't like the price. We want to put some of those items on sale, for example. Run a promotion. So let's go back to our method. So now we want to replace this with get user ID. We're going to make the call to our function. Our function will return a string back. So now I want to try the different scenarios. I want to try this first as an anonymous user with a lot of time and effort now. I know you can do it. We're going to shop as an anonymous user, and I'm going to log in a different browser, and I'm also going to try shopping as a user who's logged in. So I'm going to go to Edge first. That's right. You got it, Jennifer. Lots of coffee. So in Edge, I need some produce, 2 avocados. Okay. Session has not been configured. So we missed a step. But it's actually good that we see this, at least that's what I'm going to tell you, so that you know we can't just, yes, we need to configure the apps, unlike in PHP Manginder, where you might call session start each time, which is super annoying. We don't have to do that, but our app has to be configured in the startup file. So we need to open up startup.cs and add a couple lines of code here. So in startup, one of the things I liked least about PHP was that you had to continually call session start. So 2 lines of code in startup. In configure services, right down at the bottom, we can do it here, session support. So we call services dot add session. So that's the first line. This line, it doesn't really matter where it goes in the services. We also need a line of code in the configure method. This does matter where it goes. I learned this the hard way on Monday because I didn't read my own notes in class. I tried it at the bottom and it actually doesn't work. So I'm going to put the session support right at the top. I think it's got to go above the routing. So we'll call app.use session. Okay, so I've added lines 65 and 72. I should be able to go back to Edge now. Try my add to cart again. So we're adding this, calling services.add session in configure services, and we're calling app.use session in the configure method. So we will try this again. It's going to add 2 avocados to the cart. Okay, it says it can't find that, but it's trying to redirect, so that's okay. So now let's go and look in the database. I'll run my query. So now I've got avocados, and you can see it's given me a random ID. If I go and add something else, I want 3 mangoes. So you can see in Edge, as long as I keep this browser open, these items are all attached to my cart. What happens if I do this as a user who is logged in? Well, I'll try that in Firefox. So I'm going to log in. You could use your Google or Facebook account. I'll just use the customer account we created. Shop. This customer really likes mangoes, mango smoothies, mango lassies, Thai mango salad. So I'm going to add to cart here. And this time, because I'm logged in Firefox, the cart item, it's attached to my email address instead. I want to add something else. A container of strawberries. So now I've got, it's tied to my email address. So now our 2 scenarios are working. So you're getting an error here. Check your code, make sure you're find on the previous line. So it compiles, but you get an error in the browser. I don't know, Julian, we may have to look at it after. I'm not sure why that would be. You can send me a screenshot. And maybe a screenshot of the code or push to GitHub. I would have to look, Manjindra. I don't know. Without seeing it, I don't have a simple explanation as to why it would do that. Now, the other problem we have, there's one other issue. So here, for example, as a customer, I've got 6 mangoes and strawberries. I'm going to add 2 more mangoes. Sorry, 2 more mangoes logged in as customer. When I add to cart now, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but what's the problem here? it added to cart, but we've got a little bit of, yeah, it creates a new item. So this user, I've already got this product in my cart. So what should happen instead here? Yeah, it should do an update. It should increment. I should keep this record, but my quantity should go from 6 to 8. So we need a little bit of logic checking in the add to cart method. We don't automatically want to create a new item and add every time. We want to check if this cart already has this product. And if it does, we want to increment the quantity and update instead. So check if item already in user's cart. If so, update quantity instead. So I'm going to take the new object and add. I'm going to indent those because we're going to wrap these in an if statement. We'll say var cart item equals context.cart items dot, I'm going to use the method single or default. So this is used for finding a single record. And we're going to have a couple parameters here. It's got to be this product ID and this user. So where our product ID, let me wrap this on another line so it's easier to see, equals our product ID. And so we've got the same product and the same user. Oops, missing an equal sign. There we go. So then we're going to see, does this product already exist in this user's cart? Yes or no? So if cart item does not equal null, we can do an update. So cart item.quantity. So in this case, we're just going to increment the quantity. So we're going to update the item instead. This is now going to be inside of our else. So I'm going to move this block of code that we wrote originally to create a new object and add it. It's going to go in here instead. Now we've got one little error here because I've redeclared cart item. I can take out the var here. We're now declaring it up here when we're checking if it already exists. So I can just remove the var. So in this case, we'll update. And in this case, we will insert. I'll put all our code up on GitHub in a minute. If you're a bit behind, don't stress. So now I need to try both of these scenarios. I want to try the update again with our new logic, but I also want to make sure we didn't break the insert. So I need to test both of these. So now I'm going to try again. There's all the code. I'll leave it up on the screen. So we've got that new query on line 57. Does this user already have this product in their cart? If they do, we're going to go in here and add the new quantity. If they don't have it, we're going to run our original code to create and instantiate a new cart item object, fill the properties, and add it. And in both cases, we're going to call save changes. So that save changes, it has to happen after the if statement. This is going to run regardless. It's committing that transaction to the database. It might be an update. It might be an insert. So make sure that goes after we close that if else. So I go back and try this now. You can do it again in Firefox maybe. So I have not put soursop in my cart before, so I can add one. I'll use Firefox where I'm logged in, add it to my cart. And now I've got product ID 5, I've got quantity of 1. I'm going to add soursop again. So our insert's still working, but I want to make sure that duplicate, it gets fixed now. So I'm going to add soursop second time. I'll leave my quantity at 1, click add. And now when I check my database, this is good. I don't get a new record this time, but my quantity gets incremented from 1 to 2. So both the insert and update are now working the way they should. Because I think our logic in add to cart, we've now done everything we need to do here. Okay, if identity insert is set to off, then you need to go to your database and modify it. I'll show you how to do that. So in your database, if you right-click on your table, go into Design View. And in your primary key field, if you scroll down in the column properties, under Table Designer, there's a property called Identity Specification. Is identity, you need to change from no to yes. This is like this is basically the same as the auto increment property. Yours says yes. Well, that's interesting. Okay, let's see why. Let's go to Tools. That one's interesting. Identity insert is set to off in your cart items table. Yeah, Manjinder, that code looks right. There is a fix for this. I've seen it before, I haven't seen it for a while. Let's just see. You can try this in the query window. If it's your cart items table, try. You can try that. Set identity insert cart items on. You can try it by making a new query. Not sure if that will work. Give it a shot. So there are the properties. And identity is identity should be set to yes. Okay, I will push to get what we've done so far. So if you're a bit behind, we can see what you can compare with yours. Okay, is your primary key called cart item ID? Pascal case, and it should have this little primary key symbol here in design view. I'll just push to get quickly. Okay, Scott, it's working on yours. Did you change something? Yeah, you have to make sure that is identity is set to yes. I've pushed what we've done up to get. Okay, so you had to run the command. You did the command, it still doesn't work. Is your field called cart item ID, and does it show the primary key? I'm gonna pause the recording here.